Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show tonight. It is that time of the week again. The Seahawks are playing on Sunday, and we got to talk about it. We got to figure out what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, what we can do to make it happen the way we want it to happen. We got to figure it all out, and I'm not letting Brandon go until we figure it out, right?
We'll find a
You're not
way to
go-
beat. We're gonna find a way to beat these damn Rams. I'm gonna tell you one way
yeah,
or the
yeah,
other.
Brandon, you're not going anywhere until we figure this out.
By hook or crook, man. I don't care how we got to do this. Chill. We're gonna be buying kneecaps if it takes it this week.
Mhm. All right, so I am here with Brandon of the Hawk's Nest once again. And we are gonna figure out this upcoming Rams game. How you doing tonight, Brandon?
Doing good. Doing good. Really excited about still the potential of this season and 6-3, top the division this time of year. Pretty good state of things. All things being equal, love to see some things come together, but I'm feeling good, man.
All right, so midweek news. There really hasn't been a ton going on. The main thing, Abe Lucas is back on the practice field. He is practicing in a limited form last couple of days here. Not expecting him to play this weekend, I'll say that much. But it is clearly a step in the right direction from where we were after last week.
Yeah, he's getting to the place where we've looked at it and tracked it. We just want to get him into where if he's not playing in the Niner game, that he's ready to go at least in maybe 3 of those 4 games, or you got him down the stretch when you're hoping to make your run. You got your line in its strongest place. That's all you're really hoping for, I think, on this, and it seems to be that that's where we're trending to on this.
I will say for my part, I am prepared for anything when it comes to the Abe Lucas thing, except for him playing this weekend. I feel like that's off the table.
Yeah.
But I am prepared for anything, including him just being out for the season. I am prepared for him to play against the Niners on Thanksgiving, and any scenario in the middle will not shock me or surprise me. So
It's the
just
best way. Then
buckle up.
you're happily surprised at that point when he does go out there.
Yeah, when
Watch
you
this.
look at the way Pete's wording everything, it sounds like he's trying with his words to encourage people to be like, hey, calm down, chill out, don't get too excited yet. Just we got to see how this goes on the practice field.
Yeah, and hopefully he can get it together. The good news here too is, Brendan, that Peters had a really, really, really good game this past week, both in pass protection and as a run blocker on the right side. I don't think he'd be an answer for us long term, but at least having him as a guy to call upon even over Stone Forsythe and what he brings to the position versus Stone makes me feel a little bit better about the situation.
Yeah. Obviously, I would very much prefer to have Lucas out there than Peters, a 42-year-old who probably what you're going to see from Peters going forward, I would imagine, is some weeks he's really good, some weeks he just doesn't have it. It's going to be, up, down, up and down, up and down, up and down. So I would definitely like to have Lucas back sooner rather than later and let Peters kind of settle into that role of just, when you need me, call me up and I'll hopefully I have it that week.
Yeah, I would say the same as well too. It wasn't like he got the greatest of challenge last week with Hedges. Much bigger challenges coming down the line on that stance of things.
Other news would be Derek Young. Apparently, the injury was very minor. It's much better than expected. He's expected to play this weekend. So I guess he dodged anything particularly damaging. So that's good.
It is, and I'll tell you, we're in as good of a spot right now, Brendan, injury wise, as I can remember the team being in probably the last 3 or 4 years. They're really solid shape overall.
Jason Myers did win Special Teams NFC Player of the Week. So that's cool.
Well earned, well earned. I mean, it's hard not to give it to him when you got the 5 kicks and you got the kick for the win. Who else got a better week than that?
Yeah, that's tough to top. And that's really about it in terms of significant things going on with this team right now. The Rams side of things, we are going to get Stafford. I know there were some people questioning who we were going to deal with at quarterback this week. Stafford's good to go. That Rams team is actually very healthy right now overall. Looks like they're getting Havenstein back, Murchison back. They look pretty healthy right now.
You said that Havestein with a little German accent, man. I didn't even know you
Mhm.
had that. You get
I didn't
you
either.
get those names right, man. Yeah, Havenstein. You get a little Havenstein into
Right.
that. No, they're looking good too. As far as I mean, they're not maybe the most talented squad, but they got their big dogs are out there. You're not going to be down any bodies in this one from them.
Okay, so that's really about all there is to cover right now. Injury situation looking good. Very few guys on the report right now. Only one I'm really concerned about is Lockett, and I feel like Lockett's just kind of in that position where he's just going to miss a lot of practice this year because he doesn't need it, and he'll play in the games.
Agreed. It's with the vet guys, you just to me have a little bit more certainty of what you're getting on game day Sundays, even if they're not able to go throughout the course of the week. First, let's say a first or second year guy that needs that practice week to get him fully prepared. Locke's a vet. He knows what he needs to do. He knows what he needs to do to get ready for game day, and he'll be good to go.
So, with that being said, you want to just go ahead and open it up and get into this Rams game?
Yeah, let's dive into it. There's a lot of intricacies, I think, within this game. Despite the Rams being a 3-6 team here, Brendan, this isn't your normal, typical 3-6 team that we're going up against here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although I would say this Rams team, we both thought they were going to be an awful team this year, I think, before the season started. And they're not. But this is still a bad team, I would say. I feel, looking at their body of work, basically ever since week 2, they played 2 really good games to start the season. They blew us out. They really gave San Fran a run for their money and ended up losing that game close at the end. And then since then, they've been mediocre to bad for pretty much every game. They have fallen off pretty dramatically after a pretty hot start. Do you think that's fair?
I do, but I have a hard time viewing this team through that kind of lens a little bit. And let me just say why. Including the playoffs, the Seahawks are 5-9 against the Rams since Sean McVey took over in 2017. They've been outscored by 86 points over those 14 games, which is their worst point differential against any team in that span. For me, this is enough time with him having done this to him enough, being McVey to Carroll, that this becomes a bit of an overriding factor to me on this game. And it goes to me beyond just personnel or talent level, because what McVay's done to Coach Carroll is, to me, he's been the main attacker of Coach Carroll's philosophy, and especially when it comes to what Coach Carroll wants to do defensively. And that's the real big worrying part to me walking to this game beyond, the Rams being what they are against other teams, if that makes any sense.
But you would agree that the Rams are a bad team, regardless of the fact that maybe they match up well with us, right? And
absolutely.
That kind of leads into my general thought here. Like, this is not the time to be wrapped up in an argument like that. And to me, I hear all these people talking about how, the Rams own us, the Rams always beat us, it's a bad matchup. And I see these comments, and yeah, they are true. Going into this game, it's definitely true. But to me, it's almost like you're making your bed that you're going to cry in at the end of the season when you're not in the playoffs because you couldn't beat the Rams either time, where you're just kind of just setting yourself up for, I know we're going to lose this game and I don't care. And it's like, that's the best way I can put it. It's making your bed that you're going to cry in at the end of the season.
I don't know if that's a fair characterization myself. The reason you've had, I just pointed to something that goes to 2017. That's a track record that goes beyond just this Rams team in this season. And it goes to why the question comes, why has McVay been successful against Carroll? Why has he had that much ability to kind of, I would say, own him in that way, in a way no other coaches can't? I mean, there's been a variety of personnel that's gone through that Rams clubhouse over that 2017 span, and yet he still finds a way to get the better of Carroll more often than not. That comes down to a trend to me. That's not about setting expectations so you can whine about it down the line. That's about, hey, we've got an issue or problem with dealing with this team that we don't seem to have a solution for. That's what it's really, to me, an outstretch of. And I think that is a valid point.
Yeah. My thing is, and the way I'm approaching this game is, I understand the issues with the matchup. I understand all these things. But it's Pete Carroll's job to figure out what the problem is and then resolve the problem, right? Like, is it fair for me to say, hey, Pete, you've been playing against this team for a long time now. You should have some idea of why they always do well against us. And you should eventually be able to come up with some kind of solution, right?
Well, that's why I'm saying that. That's why I'm taking a little bit of an umbrage with this a bit and putting it to the way for the fans to look at this and say, well, he's got the better of Coach Carroll. They're not. What I think they're doing, to give him a little bit of credit in their thinking on this, Brendan, is we're evaluating Coach Carroll in this season and what he's doing, right? This is an evaluation of Geno Smith. This is evaluation of the team. This is evaluation of the front office. This is evaluation of Coach Carroll. How are they doing this rebuild? How far along have they taken this rebuild? Coach Carroll specifically, is he updating his defense? We can talk about the particulars of his defense this year and where it's come up to, but in my opinion, no, there's not been great changes on this defense the past couple of years. So is it then a coincidence that he has not yet found a solution to Sean McVay's offenses, even offenses that are undermanned like we've often seen him go up against us with in recent years? That's really the bottom point. And so what you get to is two different things: the evaluation of Carroll and whether or not it's okay to come into this game and say, this is not a typical 3-6 team. This is a 3-6 team coached by Sean McVay, who has had a coach who's owned Coach Carroll more than Harbaugh did with the Niners and what he did to him, more than any other coach in this sport who's gotten the better of him. And I think that there's something to that that's more than happenstance and luck, since this goes back to 2017. It goes to that Carroll should have a solution or be looking for solutions. And this is where you're right to bring that up of, yes, he should. But that's something that we get to the end of the year, Brendan. Again, more than it being about setting the, well, now I get a cry about the fact that we just can't own the Rams. It's about, no, in my evaluation of Coach Carroll, you don't have an answer for McVay. And the answer is not there because you're not trying an answer, because you're leaning so heavily and so hard into your old defensive machinations, specifically into that old theory of we're going to just stay in our zone coverage and let them pick us apart with things like flood zone concepts and fly zone sweeps. Or fly sweeps, not fly zones, but fly sweeps. You're going to let yourself just be nicked with these things over and over again, game after game after game, and never find any kind of solution, especially schematically speaking. So it's right to bring up the Carroll part, but people are acknowledging, rightly so, you got embarrassed in the opening game of the season by this same Rams team this year, not even going back 3 years to find an example, just this very year. Maybe your most embarrassing loss of the year came to this very 3-6 Rams team. You're the only quality win on their schedule right now. There's very much an argument to be made, I think, here that Coach Carroll has McVay having him taken the better of him, and he's not found an answer up until this point.
Right. And I'm just saying that his job over the last several years is partially to figure that out, because it's hard to get ahead when a team in your division does that to you, right? Over and over and over again. That's 2 games a year, and a team that you're constantly, duking it out with, that you have a hard time against. That's hard to overcome. It can be done, of course. Like, we've proven we can win this division. We can do better than the Rams. We did it in 2020 and 2022. But a big part of Pete's job these last several years should be, I need to figure this out and come up with some solution, especially when I clearly have a better roster than that team.
You go back from 2017 and you've watched every one of the Rams Seahawks games since 2017. What has been any defensive adjustment you've seen since that time frame that has changed in Carroll's approach? Let's take our offense versus their defense out the gate. That's a whole nother thing. Their offense, your defense, since 2017, game by game. Can you reference any game where, this one game we ran a lot of blitzes? This one game we ran a lot of press coverage looks at the line of scrimmage. This one game can you think of one game in that span?
Right, that's what I'm saying. We're not, but
no.
That should be a fair expectation, right?
Yes, 100. That part's completely fair. I'm 100% on this, saying if you don't find a solution, this is a big part of the evaluation of Coach Carroll, because he's not the only coach to utilize these methods against you. That's the bigger part of this at play too. McVay is just the best at using it, but he's not the only one. And so that's why it's completely valid from that's to put up Carroll and say, you should be better than this on this, because you're not. The thing is it's one thing if you're looking for answers and those answers are failing and you're trying different answers. But when you're trying the same answer in general, in basically the general most fashion every time, and it's not failing, then you're showing an unwillingness to find any other changes, to find any fixes. And that's the big problem and issue. But I think people are right to notice that this is an issue here with this team and as it stands.
Yeah, it definitely is. But what I'm trying to get to here is that when I make my pregame video on Saturday, because I always upload my final pregame video on Saturday, I'm not going to make that video. I'm not going to say things like, oh, well, we're going to lose and it's okay because the Rams always beat us. It's not a big deal. Like, it's all good, guys. The Rams always beat us. Just take it. Just take the L and everything will be cool. And then after the game when they beat us, I'm not going to be like, who cares? No, because this is very important here because if you look at the other side of the schedule after this Rams game, we could play really well for a month and it would still be hard to win a single game. Like, that's how bad it is. So you can't go into this game just thinking, let's just take that whooping. They're going to get us like they always do. And it's cool. No, it's not cool.
No, you're 100% right. It's there's no that, hey, they got our number and shucks, that just sucks. No, why do they have our number? And are we doing anything about that in them having our number? And I get frustrated with it because, like I said, make that point, I don't think that we have. And I'm going to be looking for that this week to see what it is you do to kind of counter that on this. But it's frustrating. And no, fans shouldn't just say, well, they just got our number, that's just the way. No. They have our number and we're not doing anything about it. It's the second part with the first part.
Yeah. There's nothing cool about a team in your division having your number for more than half a decade.
No. And again, especially if you're not doing any adjustments with it, when you're doing they're doing different stuff and failing, I'd be like, well, we're trying, we brought blitzes this time. Well, we decided to run the cover 3 Hall game this time. Well, we decided to do base coverage. If you tried some different, we went man coverage this week against him. If you did some different things, that'd be one thing. This is the issue I have with the Niner game, Brendan, is that you have that Brock Purdy game in the first game, second game that we played against the Niners last year. He's picking you apart. You're in soft zones. He has a successful game doing just that. Basically, you get to the playoff game, no nose tackles, knowing you got to take some risks, knowing you're on the road. Do you try a different strategy? Do you bring the stack fronts? Do you bring some more blitzes at that point? No, we try to just drop into our same old thing and see if that would get by. And it just doesn't work going to that as the same answer over and over again, sometimes from a defensive standpoint. And partially why we still find ourselves this year, 22nd? I know as much as people feel like we've moved forward defensively, the bottom line on this is that what are we, 6 places better than we were last year? In a year we
it's not even 6 because last year we were 25th.
Yeah. So you're 3 places better than you were last year with a full season almost of Jamal and Witherspoon in there and Leonard Williams and his impact. And yet you've only gone up this. And that's with a schedule that's been pretty light. That's with a schedule where you face 3 backup quarterbacks along the way. It's probably why this is one of the places that's one of the more important parts for me in watching and monitoring the season at this point, Brendan, is what goes on with this defense and what Coach Carroll does with this defense. Because he's got the talent in place right now. He can't go to I don't have any nose tackles. I got 4-3 guys and a 3-4. You got your guys in place. You put the assets to that side of the ball, including making the aggressive trade deadline move to help your defense. Got to see some returns now from that here with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so dissecting this Rams team, you want to start with the offense or the defense? What you feeling?
Let's start with the offense because we're kind of on that right now anyway to begin things here a little bit with McVay's crew.
So it starts with Stafford, who had a really good start to the season. He had a great game against us, I thought. I know the numbers were not overpowering, but I thought he played very well. And then he played very well against the Niners. I think Van Jefferson hung him out to dry on a play that actually, if the Rams make that play, they may win that game. So since then, not so much. It's been a little bit of a tougher journey for Stafford. By some metrics, he's been among the worst quarterbacks in the league since then. So what are you seeing happen there with Stafford over these last month plus worth of games?
It has been a bit of a tough evaluation because of how well he looked in that first week, Brendan. When I went back and watched the All-22 especially, he was putting some throws in with velocity and placement that was, the word pinpoint gets used a lot in regards to quarterbacks, but it was that. You were watching guys with outstretched fingers and the ball gliding just past him, putting it to the only spot a guy could catch it. His decision-making being just absolutely unassailable. Part of that, I think, comes from a bit of the fact of how you play defense and Stafford knowing the defense he's facing with McVay and McVay, letting him know what he's going to be able to do. And in that game, it was short and in the middle of the field. They ate all day in the middle of our defense. And we never really had any answers over the course of the game for that. They could just kind of, whenever they wanted to, find 10 yards in the center of the field. And it wasn't just to one guy. Puka Nacua had an awesome game, but that's where they're able to be, I think, uniquely successful against us. And when you look at the Niners and him having success against them, that's another thing the Niners have in common with us, Brendan, is that there's a simplicity to their defense because they are so talented. They can run it a little more simpler. So you're not necessarily challenging Stafford as much to think at that point as maybe some of these other teams have been willing to do, like a Steelers team that runs that, their 3-4s and a Cowboys team with Quinn that can be a little bit more, mix things up a little bit more for the quarterback and what they're seeing across from them. So, maybe what these teams are telling you versus what you and the Niners did in the first couple of weeks is don't keep it simple, stupid, right? That old, what is that? That old mantra, right? But instead, try to reach for a little bit of complexity to try to find some spots where maybe you can confuse Stafford. You didn't blitz hardly at all in that first matchup. So there's some places here I think you can find some adjustments. I don't know where his thumb, not really sure where his thumb is at per se. So that's a little bit of the tough part of evaluating this is how well is he going to be able to throw? Because we've seen with quarterbacks in those finger injuries, Russell, we saw it 2 years ago, it can make it very hard for them on those throws, and they can look very diminished really fast off of one little digit going.
Burrow going through it right now for the same reason, it looks like, yeah.
And Burrow had that carpet tunnel kind of thing, right? And he threw that ball, and you're going, oh no, what happened, man? And I haven't seen QBs do that very often. But
it is said that he almost played against the Packers, and then they had their bye week. So he was very close to being able to play 2 weeks ago. So that's probably a pretty good sign for his abilities on Sunday.
Yeah, I would say so. And the Cowboy game he wasn't as bad in that one. I watched that game. So there was an interception in that game. But he wasn't as bad. Your defense just kind of got boat raced. Cowboys at home, just, when they get on top of you and start rolling, it is an avalanche. They're just weirdly a team like that plays like a front runner team in games. You stay middle with them or you can get on top of them early. It's a little bit of a different fight, but, yeah, I think he's still going to be a tough matchup for us this week. And I think that we're going to get much more closer to what he was with week one, especially if we're going to drop into more of the soft zone based defense, lack of blitz and all that, or complexity, then you're going to probably see him able to play in a similar fashion, especially now that he's got Cooper Kupp, who he didn't have in that first time we faced him.
Right. So one thing that I did, I was looking some stuff up earlier today, looking at some charts and data. Matt Stafford through this year, even though he's not really playing well, leads the league in lowest negative play rate. So basically, what percentage of your plays end in a clearly negative outcome, which is what? Interception, fumble, sack, or basically any play that is considered to be really crippling. His rate is the lowest, except for Kyler Murray, and Kyler has only played one game, so that shouldn't even count. So he is doing a phenomenal job avoiding negative plays, which feels very unlike the Stafford who was, kind of a risk taker, gunslinger for many, many years.
When I saw those first 2 games of how he played this year against us and the Niners, there was a part of me that was starting to feel like, is he having the best start to his career, even beyond? Because remember that Super Bowl year, he got hot at the end of the year. He wasn't really great to begin things. And he started
led the league in picks that year.
Yeah, it was an up and down thing. This started this year, he was playing like the best quarterback in the sport through the first 2 weeks. It hasn't quite, of course, held up to that. You got the tough Bengals game that they go up against the Colts, where they were able to get a win, and he played good in that Colts game. So he was good in that one overall too as well. But he's still, to me, he's at that place that we see quarterbacks at, Brendan, that they reach. Kirk Cousins is at this place where I talk about it being that doctorate level stage of quarterbacking, where you still have a lot of almost all the same physical talent, maybe a little bit diminished from where you were in your prime, but from the neck up, you have basically mastered the sport for all intents and purposes. And especially having a McVay guy like that by his side at the same point in time, it's a guy that's going to start to be able to, kind of show you a little bit of that mastery. It's like what you saw to Kurt Warner at the end of his career, when he came over from the Giants to the Cardinals and everybody thought, okay, Warner's shot, the Rams days are long gone. Yet he found that last leg to his career at that time because he had also reached that kind of stage where you couldn't show him something that he hadn't already seen before.
Right. So the conventional wisdom that you and me used to use about Stafford when we would play against him was he'll give you a couple chances to take the ball away. And maybe that's not true anymore. I don't know. Maybe he's figured how to get that part of his game down a little bit.
Those numbers you mentioned add up to our eye test in that first game, right? Can you remember of even one throw that was even in the vicinity of being nearly picked? You're muted.
No. So, yeah, that matches up. And by the way, on that list, Geno is 5th lowest. So everybody calm down. Everybody just chill out. However bad you think it is, it's not that bad.
You're not getting there on the Geno discussion. Ain't no chill in that discussion, man.
All right. So that Stafford was having a good first couple games, a little bit rougher lately, but there's reason to believe that he's still doing everything that he can. This is still a very limited roster he has around him. And by the way, they're kind of sort of softly blowing it up, aren't they? They traded Cam Akers for nothing. They traded Van Jefferson for nothing. These are the activities of a team that in some ways are acknowledging that, look, this is not our year. Let's weaken ourselves a little bit while, we're not going to tank, but if we can get an asset, a future asset for a current asset, we're going to do it. So this roster keeps getting shorter and shorter around Stafford, and he's holding it together.
Yeah, and I think they felt like they could make that Jefferson trade, especially because, he definitely mentioned the moment he had with the Niners where he definitely sold them there in that, or definitely cost that game in the pot. And he's not been a guy, they thought that was a guy who came out who was supposed to be I think he had like a dad that was in the pros and supposed to be very pro ready. Instead, he was very much a rough kind of around the edges receiver. But Puka Nuka's ascent definitely, I think, kind of drove a little bit of the willingness of that trade. Tutu Atwell has also come along for them. He's not like a super great, impactful force, but he's a consistent force. He gives you a field stretcher there for them. What's interesting about them right now, Brendan, is they're trying to rock, 2 slot receivers at the same time. So when they go to 3 wide, one of those slots ends up on the outside. And it's my understanding that that's not necessarily fluidly been brought to bear on this offense. Because even back in the day when you had Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks were outside guys. They could play on the outside and win on the outside. And Coop could occasionally be out there. But Kupp was really an inside slot guy. Nuka doesn't have the speed to operate on the outside. So that will be a bar of this matchup being interesting to watch of how we defend that, being that they don't have those guys on the outside that are the burners necessarily.
Right. So that is one strength of this team. Puka's been really good. Kupp has been himself more or less when he's been healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And Atwell has come along to at least be an NFL caliber receiver who doesn't take a lot off the table. Higbee's okay too. He's, okay. He's fine. He's just whatever.
He's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's not much I can say about that group other than they have done a pretty good job there. And I don't mind seeing Puka do well because he was a Husky for a couple years there. I kind of mind seeing it with this team, but
it's a great story. It's a great story though. Kid never really finds his footing in college and then comes out and has one of the best starts we've ever seen of a receiver, at least through the 4 or 5 game. Hell, he might be setting records if Kupp never came back this year. He might be up there well over 1,000 yards at this point and whatnot. So he's been tremendous, man. In that first game, he made some great catches. Tough kid, great contested catch. Just gets open, just like Kupp.
Yeah,
always open.
When he had that game, I did think to myself, he's never going to have a game anywhere close to that again. And fortunately, I guess that hasn't been the case. So I guess he's just good. I guess we can at least just say he's good. Obviously, like I said, they traded Cam Akers. So they've been rocking with Darrell Henderson, I believe, at running back, with a little bit of Kyron Williams. And there isn't much to speak of back there, is there?
I think Henderson's gone at this point, isn't he? Is he still on the roster?
I think he is.
I could be wrong.
But it's kind of a very it's not much of a running back room. I'll put it like that. Darrell Henderson Jr. looks like their starter right now, and then they've got Royce Freeman and Zach Evans. Actually, is how their depth chart currently goes.
Yeah, it's not a killer crew, that's for sure. Whoever's out there playing and rolling. I think they do have an injury to. I think it's Kyron might have an injury. I think that, and so that's been their main back, who's been their most effective back at 4.7 yards per carry. Their line's blocking pretty good for whoever the back is, and so they do create some holes, relatively speaking, for those backs, and they block it up pretty well. They aren't using as much this year, Brendan, and me, of the fly sweeps. You look at 4 carries for Atwell as your sort of fly sweep guy for them, and then not really anybody else. Skoranik's got 2, Puka's got 2, but they throw. I think they ran against us in that second game 5, 6.5 in that first half against us last year in that second game in Seattle. So
the game with Baker.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So I don't know why they're dialing it back a little bit less this year, but that'll be for our benefit if they do, because that's been one of the plays that they've been able to hit us with that we've struggled with defensively speaking.
Right. So speaking of their offensive line, this is where the kind of weakness of this roster sets in a little bit. The right side has been nice. By the way, fun fact, Kevin Dotson is the top rated guard in all the NFL by PFF.
Yeah, got him as kind of a kicker trade from the Steelers at the start of the year. Steelers were just kind of, about the Steelers, like, man, we could use that now. But he was inconsistent with them, and then he's taken right to the Rams. Maybe it's just different scheme that suited him is what he needed to go to. But yeah,
Right.
he's 80 or something, right?
84
Yeah.
flat. Yeah, and Havenstein's always good. Havenstein's always good when he's on the right side. So that side of the offensive line is nice. So it's the left side where they're having some issues. They've got a Alaric Jackson at left tackle, one of those Iowa guys who kind of comes into the league and they're already tapped out. They're already like the best that they're ever going to be, but they are coming out of the box ready to go to at least play. So I remember scouting him a little bit in the draft and kind of liking that, low ceiling but high floor. And he is currently their starting left tackle. It looks like he's not playing particularly well, but he's not atrocious. And then you've got the rookie next to him, Avila, and then you've got Coleman Shelton. So that left side of the offensive line seems like that's where you might be able to attack here.
Yeah, a bit. I think Avila gives you the up and down over the course of the game where he has the flashy moments that you see why he's a second round pick, and then he'll have those rookie boneheaded moments as well. So he's doing all right over there. I don't think that there's any spots in the line that's like a complete, empty kind of space you can really attack.
They don't have Evan Neal.
Yeah, they don't have an Evan Neal type out there that you can just really go after, but it's also not a dominant blocking crew either on the other side of it, to your point.
So our defense against their offense is going to be interesting to see how our corners handle their receivers. That's a great matchup, by the way. We got maybe the best corner trio in the NFL. It's got to be top 3. And they've got these really good receivers. So that's going to be a good battle. But other than that, you would expect this front 7 to be able to beat this offensive line. And to me, the question just becomes, are you going to let your cornerbacks, are you going to let them hunt a little bit here and mix things up a little bit more with your other players? Are you willing to blitz Stafford? Are you willing to throw stuff at him? And if we do, I think this can work out because I trust our cornerbacks to handle that receiver crew.
So you had one stat that stood out to me last time of the first game, Brendan, was 2.64. 2.64 seconds was the average time Matt Stafford held onto the ball and got it out of his hand in the very first matchup. How do the Seahawks defense adjust to that? What do they do to prevent that? Because you blitz obviously, and I'm with you, by the way. I do think you need to blitz. So I'm not saying taking that anything away from that, but I'm just truly meaning that ask this in the nature of what is the solution? How do we force Matt Stafford to hold on to the ball longer, to give our pass rush the time it will take to get there and actually generate pressure in the pocket?
I think you got to play aggressively with these receivers. I think you got to attack them at the line of scrimmage.
Agreed. Disrupt the routes. Jams at the line of scrimmage. Get them to where it takes longer getting the routes. How about taking away the middle of the defense and middle of the field and forcing more throws to the outside of the hashes against this Rams defense? Not letting them live in the center of the field because that's where a lot of those short passes were going to, and where he's hitting the back foot and looking right there and hitting it and finding some more coverage schemes to, again, aggression at the forefront of this, being that you got to then open things up on the back end for a big arm on Stafford who can hit you over the top, but they only really have Atwell, who's the guy who can hit you over the top. Kupp and Puka aren't running away from anybody. Right. And so that's going to be a big key on this game, Brendan. You sat back in your soft coverages, you didn't blitz, but he still got the ball out of his hand really fast.
Right. One question I would have for you. Woolen, first of all, let me just say this. According to PFF, the number 1 cornerback in the league this year in terms of allowing yards per snap as an outside corner who has played at least 200 snaps. He's giving up an average of 0.8 yards per route, which is best in the league, 0.1 ahead of Sauce Gardner. Ooh. So despite our concerns about him, in some areas, he is still playing extremely well.
Yeah.
What does he...
Sorry,
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, to finish the thought, what does he do in this game? Because none of these receivers lend themselves really well to an obviously good matchup for Woolen, right?
I think that's where the help to the middle, you're going to play zone defense, but you can play your zones in different places, right? You don't have to drop your zone every time to depth, 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 depth. You can drop your zone to some shortness. And there has been times in games like, for instance, the Giants game, the Cardinals game. I feel like the Browns game was a little bit like this too, where you were willing to tighten some of your zones up a little bit. It's not been the way they've gone with the Rams, but what I mean by this is, let's say you have Tariq Woolen in press coverage and he's going to lay a one-handed stab press. And now that receiver comes off and then he wants to get into the middle of the field off of a slant route or a slow drag across the field. If you've got the defense bringing the shorter routes up front, and even if he kind of loses an instant after that press, right, where there's some quick separation, you've got the shorter routes covered up at that point, then you can make that to where Woolen doesn't have to worry about that. And we're always got to worry about is if he gets that press, the guy trying to get over the top of him and stack him, which he knows he's got the speed to stay with him at that point. So what I'm kind of saying is, if you remove the thing that then he becomes vulnerable to, like you're talking about, which would be change of direction and taking advantage of a guy that's 6'3", trouble with flipping his hips necessarily. A way to take that away is they're going to make him flip his hips on what? It's going to be on a stop and then cut in kind of route, slant in cutting route, drag route. It's essentially start up the field and then come in. It's not going to be start up the field, try to go over the top, because they're not going to want to test him on the 4.26 speed, right? Cup isn't, Puka's not. And he's going to know that. So he's got to lay in that pocket as well, as like, I can leave a little bit over the top. I can trust my speed up over the top. Thinking back to last year, for instance, on this, Brendan, in the game that we played against the Rams in the first game, Woolen got an interception, almost had 2 in that game. And how did he do it? By baiting the quarterback, because he had a guy in Wolford who didn't have the arm strength. And he said it at the end of the game. So he confirmed this even at the end of the game, where he's setting up and allowing the receiver to look like he's getting that depth. And then he knows he can catch up to that receiver because he's not that fast. He's got a similar thing going on this year with these guys. One of the guys will be on the outside there most of the time that he's facing against, not named Atwell. Atwell's got 4.3 speed, but with Atwell, you can press him to death. You hit one arm on Atwell at 6'3" and you're at the line of scrimmage, you're going to bring that guy to a standstill at 150 pounds. So if you leave those zones open in the middle of the field and he does that little juke move, and then a Cooper Kupp guy or Puka, that's their move they do, right? They start off the line of scrimmage and they do a little, and they cut inside, and you give them that inside opening. You give that, there's nobody in that zone at that point, or you let them run a flood zone concept where they run one guy through and there's nobody else through, which we got to talk about the flood zone concepts here a little bit. That's then where you're now going to get destroyed all day on that kind of route with Tariq, like you're talking about. But Tariq's had a really good year, and he's been, I think he's had a couple of moments that stand out for people, but he's been very consistent. And even in those games where he's had some catches he's given up, he's also given you some really bright spots too, as well. In addition to that, I'm encouraged by what I've seen. He's really coming on strong too as the years wore on.
Casper Solari, thank you for the $2. Having Spoon is going to be big against 2 slot receivers. And yeah, this was the other thing that I was kind of leading to here. If there's one big element to this team that we did not have in week 1 that we have now, it is Witherspoon. You can make a pretty coherent argument that Witherspoon is our best player overall right now. He is bringing it on every level.
Absolutely, you can. And this is going to be a big addition back to this defense versus what you had last time, and him matching up on the slot. Because outside the Rams going to 4 wide receivers, that's the only time they can put 2 slots on the field at one given time and have them actually bolt in the slot. So, somebody's got to go to the outside at that point. He's going to be in there on the slot. It's going to be one of the matchups, Brendan, my eyes are going to be drawn to throughout the course of the day of what he's doing out there. And I'm really interested to see how he holds up versus how we held up in week 1 with, what was it? Was Kobe Bryant there in week 1, I believe?
It was Kobe Bryant. We had a little bit of Mike Jackson, a little bit of Artie Burns. We tried a bunch of different stuff. It didn't work very well, no. Yeah, but I'm so happy we figured out the slot thing, by the way. I was worried that it would be one of those things that made sense on paper that we would talk about all year and then the team would never do it. But very quickly, they figured out the best thing they can do right now is put Witherspoon in the slot.
And he's showing you how you've noticed that the fans haven't, you remember when this first came up, there was a lot of kind of moaning about the fact if you're moving him from outside corner and no, we're not getting he needs to stay on the outside, where I think fans have really gotten to feel the impact of him being floating between outside and inside, and how this is to the maximum impact and maximum effect of Witherspoon on the field by moving him in there. That it's not merely you're failing out at an outside corner, so we have to put you into the failure spot. It's because you do great in both, but we really love what the impact you bring here, because you're taking something away that makes it much tougher for offenses.
And again, he plays every snap. He moves outside when it calls for it. He just plays the slot when the slot is there.
Right. Exactly. But it's still just that it's showing you the value of needing to defend that slot and how it's not just a third wheel of the three wide receivers. It's in a lot of times, especially for this Rams offense we're playing this week. That's the front wheel. That's the first wheel you got to deal with before you get to the back two wheels.
All right. So that's most of the stuff going on with this Rams offense. Anything else you want to toss out there about how we can make something happen here beyond just what usually happens when we play this team?
Well, the obviously the complexity is what I'm looking for more than anything else. I'd love to see the stack front usages of what we've seen against our offense the past couple of weeks, for instance, with the Baltimore Ravens, and to a lesser degree what we saw last week from the Commanders and them trying to kind of duplicate the Ravens game plan. That's what I'd like to see here with the Rams. You don't have to bring a blitz every time, but bringing those stack fronts up and making Stafford have to think that through at the line of scrimmage, unsure by what you're going to do post snap. That's really the key here to facing this McVay-led offense, is to not allow them certainty post snap. What I see prior to the snap is what I'm going to get. You do that, and this is kind of a synonymous point of the Seahawks defense even this year, of what you see is what you're going to get. What they show you is what you're going to get. And so that's removing a thinking part of the quarterback's play at that point. He almost doesn't have to think. He can go in automatic mode at that point, thus making the quarterback position so much easier to then play, Brendan. So we've got to find a way to make it harder for him to play. It doesn't mean just blitz city, but it does mean that you've got to vary in this up. You've got to change it up, and you've got to try to keep him a little bit unsure of what he's seeing. The last part I'll say on this, on the defense, and a big part of why McVay's owned you since 2017, regardless of whether it's McVay or Goff at the quarterback position, is the flood zone concepts. Shanahan's taken this torch and really run with it the last couple of years when he's played the Seahawks teams especially. But the running one receiver through your zone, clearing a defender out of that zone, and then running another receiver through the back of that zone once the front guy's cleared that defender through. It's simplistic. It's not terribly complicated. But it's something, if you watch these games, and something to pay attention to this upcoming matchup, it's something McVay will hammer all game long. And a lot of their pass plays you can watch are on the back of it. If it isn't a pure flood zone concept, Brendan, it'll be Atwell on the outside as a receiver, right? And he runs a straight 9 route, taking the cornerback who's running cover 3 and taking him to depth. Now he runs Cooper Kupp on a crosser, a deep crosser, back into the same zone where Atwell's just run the 9 route, thus clearing the cornerback out. The safety's cleared out over the top because Quandre's playing single high. And now Cooper can sneak in underneath that zone where there's now that trailing defender out of the slot, or a linebacker having to pick him up in space across the middle of the field has to try to cover that really tough cover at that point. Watch it. They hammer these kind of routes over and over again. We've got to find a way to defend them. We've got to find, again, come back to it again. What's the answer here? What are you going to try to kind of do to go off of that? But when I watch the all 22 tape, Brendan, the part that's the most kind of horrific part to watch of, and when we play these McVay-led offenses, is watching these two offensive players. It's like they're holding hands almost, like one guy's running and he's holding the other guy's hand, and okay, I'm going through first. And he takes Jordan Brooks, and Brooks takes the cheese, goes with that first guy, and then here comes the second guy into that vacated zone, and he's sitting there, and Hawk fans look at that point and they're like, how's he so wide open? They just blew a coverage. But it's not your guy picked the guy up in coverage. He just didn't hand him off. And that handoff portion just does not happen in our coverages very often, where we can you're in a zone. You're not picking up a guy and then taking that guy like it's man. You're handing him off to the other guy's zone at that point. And that's just what the flood zone concepts really attack.
Right. And, sometimes offensively, it really is just that simple. It is, you don't force your receiver to get open. You scheme him open. You trick the defense into allowing him to get open.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right. That's part of what a great coaching staff does, right? Is it doesn't just expect the talent to go out there and win. The talent's got to go out there and do its job and kind of win too. But you also need to have coaches that can scheme up those opportunities for those players to find success. Have it be a bit of both.
Byron D, thank you for the member message. Can we please keep Jason Peters on the sideline? Stone is doing more than fine. I like them both, but Peters has a penalty like every drive. Yeah, I mean, the thing with Peters, if he has to play a lot going forward, I expect inconsistency because he is so old. And for instance, if he plays this weekend against the Rams, and then you get to that Thursday game and you've got the quick turnaround, I wouldn't shock me if he's just inactive for that game, because you can't have him play a game 4 days after playing in another game. So things like that. Yeah. But I will say this, he's not playing badly. It's just the penalties. Maybe he doesn't have the rhythm with the rest of the offensive line yet. Maybe he's jumping and flinching, false starting because he's not as familiar with these guys the way he would be if he had been here all year. I don't know what it is.
On two of the false starts, is it your take on this as well, though? Because the false starts have happened in back-to-back weeks. Both of the false starts that he's had called on him, the defensive players jumped first. It's my understanding that when the defensive player jumps on the defensive line first, and then the offensive player reacts to that, that the penalty is supposed to be on the defensive player. But the past 2 weeks, two of those penalties on Peters, I can put right on the back myself of the call was mucked up by the officials, in my opinion.
My understanding is that would only happen if the defender goes into the neutral zone. So is that happening on those plays?
See, I didn't know if it's in the neutral zone. That's the whole thing. This is why, like, for instance, defensive players can't go yell hut, hut, hut. You can't do things to set off the offensive linemen. You can't try to force them to false start by what you're doing. That's by the spirit of the rule as I understand it. So I don't think that you have to be, if your false start happens, if your move happens, which then causes them to jump, I thought that then is the way it's called. I could be wrong on that, but that's been my understanding of it. Even if they're not in the zone, though, on both of those two plays, the defender jumps and they jump, whether they're getting the neutral zone or not, they're not moving lateral. They're going like this forward, like they're coming, which that's kind of a natural thing for linemen, whoever they are, to kind of jump up at that point and move. Stone's played a really good year. He's 62 grade. I like Stone a lot and what he's brought. But Stone is playing kind of far out of position. He has excelled within it. He hasn't had the toughest of competition to go up in his games that he's played. If you look at Stone in the games he's gone up as far as his real challenges go, like who were the Giants running at him? Thibodeau some of the time, but he was really on the blind side. Who's the other edge rusher for the Giants? Ojulari. I mean, kind of a challenge. He's played good. I can see the sentiment behind I'd rather just run with Stone. The one thing I worry about with Stone that I like with Jason Peters that I get instead, that I'm kind of really on right now, is the run blocking element. We have so many guys on this line right now that are pass blockers first and foremost, and Stone is definitely one of those guys. And that's where I go, we could stand to get some more guys in here who could create more consistent holes in the running game a little bit more. I'm with you on the whole thing with Peters not being a long-term guy out there. And I think to your point on that, Brendan, the plan here is to have Lucas back by that Niner game so that whole thing of Peters having to go out there and play for that, quick turnaround to that point, it's not going to be a bridge that they have to cross. But I do think he may give you a little bit more as a run blocker than what you get from Stone, where that's never really been Stone's game.
Right. I would say that Peters is also playing out of position. He's not a right tackle either. He's a left tackle. And in generally speaking, in the past, the games he has had to play right tackle, those have been his worst games. Mm-hmm. He's doing okay for us so far overall, but I am waiting for the other shoe to drop. And hopefully Lucas gets back before the other shoe actually drops.
Certainly, but he's got a lot more of a track record at right tackle than Stone does, at least. Oh, yeah. He's got a little more of a familiarity there with it. And Stone's played really well. I don't want to get he has played a really good season.
Yeah, this is the best football he's ever played, including like preseason games where he's going against third and fourth stringers.
Yeah, even far beyond preseason performances, you look, especially at his grades. I mean, it's startling difference from where he's been. I mean, he's got a great, I don't know what to make of, even for instance, like the Cleveland game where he put a 94 run blocking grade up. Like, where'd that come from? Blows me away a little bit with it. So but he has been solid. I can get the sentiment behind sticking with him. I think that that's why I think they're doing it, is I think they think they're getting a little more run block ability with Peters, and that you've got Haynes isn't giving as much run block. Lewis isn't really giving much run. Evan Brown, more pass blocker from the center position. So you're leaning into maybe trying to put few more bodies out there that can move some guys off the line.
Okay, so let's now turn the page to this Rams defense, which has been a little better than I thought. Kind of like the Rams as a whole. They're not awful. They still have some pretty significant talent deficiencies on this group, I would say. They do have Aaron Donald, and he's playing very well, it looks like. Aaron Donald has basically, I would say, playing better than he was playing last year even. So that's obviously a step in the right direction for him. Other than that, though, is there anything else on this defense that stands out to you positively? Something that's working really well?
They're multiple. So they're going to do that thing that I'm looking for instance, are, our defense to do, Brendan, where they're going to flip it up and change it up, and they're going to, throw everything at you, every kind of look in the book, you're going to see over the course of the game with them. I think they've done a good job of getting pretty good production out of the rookies. This was a team that had not a lot of talent there bringing to the table. Like you said, I think it's a fair assessment that maybe they're not a bad team, but they certainly are leaning into the rebuild for the most part with some of the moves you've seen them make in their approach this season. They're clipping $50 million of dead money on their cap this year, so they're trying to turn this around fast. But a guy that we scout a lot, Byron Young out of Tennessee, the other Byron Young, not the Alabama guy, the edge guy. Right. I think he's come along a lot further, a lot faster for them than you and I thought at 5 sacks, and he's been a good run defender for them overall. I think pretty good run defender for them as well. I didn't think I saw that coming down the track. I thought he was going to be a little bit of a rawer guy that was going to take a little bit of time to find refinement. Kobe Turner's giving him a body in the middle to go with Donald. I think it's pretty for Donald to do what he's doing right now, Brendan. I mean, he doesn't got the Gaines or the Ashawn Robinson or, the other Alabama kid they had there for years who was playing there, Clemens, or what was it? Not Clemens. It was, I forget the name. They had another guy. They got in the first round. Brockers isn't there anymore. No Ndamukong Suh. He's got nobody next to him. So he's eating up a lot of double teams and not a lot of help, but still is producing, like you said. But other than that, Khalil Witherspoon's having a really good season for them. That guy's one of those players, Brendan. There's some of these guys that they play good everywhere they go, but they can never seem to find a home, and it's the weirdest thing, but have another year where he's out there, balling kind of. He's not completely top 5 corner or anything, but considering the expectation they probably had and taking a flyer on and bringing him in there, they're really, really happy with what they're getting.
I call them the NFL version of Jack Reacher. They just kind of wander from city to city every year and
solve crimes
they never
and
settle down.
Help you win games. That's right.
Exactly. Witherspoon has been playing fairly well. I have noticed that. Kobe Durant, not so much. Seems like he's having a little bit of a disappointing year after playing decently last year. But I look at this defense and I still see a lot of things you can take advantage of. Their linebackers are kind of, although they are getting Ernest Jones back, he's probably their best guy there, but still not really good in the middle. Their safeties are just kind of whatever. Like they don't have a big presence at safety. They don't really have other than Byron Young. I don't see much with this team at edge rusher. I don't see them being able to challenge our tackles the way some of these teams are able to do. So there's definitely a way to attack this defense productively.
Yeah, there is. I think that we got to start this off with finding it doesn't have to be balanced, but you've got to find consistency in the run game. When I look at the Seahawks offense in recent weeks and a place they're struggling in, that I'm looking for confidence in them, their ability to fix the struggles, which don't necessarily just come by an Abraham Lucas coming back or Peters coming back, is they're dealing with those stack fronts and specifically the blitzes off the stack fronts. And watching a lot of the all-22 tape of this past game, I don't know if it goes to Geno or it goes to the offensive line and not picking up protections that are called out, but there's a lot of free rushers coming. There's a lot of lack of Geno being able to react to then where he needs to go with the hot route read and to find the shorter read when it's happening. He seems to be getting surprised by it a lot. And when I call Rams multiple, they're going to be multiple in the way of aggression too. And they're going to be very aware. They're going to watch this tape over the past couple of weeks of the Ravens and the Commanders and what they did. And they're going to replicate that. And they did it to a degree even in that first opening week matchup. So like you say, there's not the edge rushers that they can attack you with, but Brendan, they're also not going to stick there with just 4 and 5 man fronts and just hope that those guys can get home. They're going to drive that. And the thing is when they even go to those 5 man fronts, the tough part about that then becomes now you have to have Aaron Donald in a one-on-one situation, even if you had prescribed up prior to the snap that you want to double team him, because you got 5-on-5 and absent keeping a running back in there, you're not going to have anybody else to deal with him on that. So this is the places where they can give you a hard time in generating stuff, even if they don't have the talent to get it done. And the part I worry about, because we've been struggling with it in recent note.
Excuse me. Yeah. So how would you deal with Aaron Donald in this game? What are you thinking over there? Just off the cuff.
I would double team him with that said. And if I get a 5-man front look, I would have my running back stay in for a lot of the game to then pick up the free blitzer and continue my commitment to the double team. It's hard to do because they moved Donald all over that line too. I mean, they moved him to both defensive end spots. It's not as simple as but it's a place that stands out to me when you think about the history of Donald here with the Rams, doesn't it, Brendan? He has sacked us or Russell Wilson more than any other player and any other player sacked a quarterback in history. He has been a problem through so many games through the years that we've not been able to deal with and that we've just struggled with over and over again. Understandably so, because he's been the best defensive player of the past decade. But you've also not done a lot, Brendan, have you, to double team him or give him a lot of consideration in that realm to treat him like the problem that he truly is, isn't he? When you look at it in recent history, we've just mainly tried to block it up with him. We've just tried to mainly say, let's see if our guy can just get it done today against him. And that's not been a prerequisite for success.
I'll tell you though, he's only sacked Geno Smith once. He's got one career sack on Geno Smith. Let's keep him clean. Let's keep it at one. How about that? I would get behind that.
That sounds good to me. And if you can't double him on the break, just try to set out to try to double him as much as absolutely possible and lean into that. And if some other defensive player beats you in this game, Brendan, so be it. If Michael Hooked ends up being the guy that beats you, then fine, I can live with that. But having Donald beat you again, we come down to a common denominator, like we talked about with the defense, just doing something different to deal with what's been a long-standing problem. And that's something that has been going on the defensive side of the ball here for this Rams team when we've dealt with them, as has the offensive side of the ball and dealing with the concepts that McVay's been trotting out.
Yeah, and one thing that this Rams team does not do is force turnovers. They are one of the least turnover forcing defenses in the entire NFL. I think they have like 5 on the season. So that is, at the very least, one thing that we don't have to worry about all that much. So I want to talk a little bit about Geno because I saw something really interesting earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm making a video about it tomorrow, but I want to talk about this. So somebody charted EPA on plays on dropbacks where the ball is thrown over the middle versus percentage of dropbacks that go over the middle.
Okay.
Geno Smith was one of the best quarterbacks in the league at throwing the ball over the middle of the field in terms of EPA.
Mm-hmm.
He was like top 7, top 8, something like that. But he threw the ball over the middle the least of any quarterback in the league. It was like 25% of dropbacks. Just for reference, Stafford was close to the front with like 45. So there are some quarterbacks that were close to 50, by the way. So Geno Smith, very good and efficient and effective at throwing the ball over the middle, but he never does it compared to these other quarterbacks. So again, I have a video about this tomorrow, but Geno, I don't think, would have an issue throwing the ball over the middle. He's tall enough to do it. He can see over the defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
I think Waldron wants to throw the ball over the middle because he comes from that McVay tree, and that's what McVay does, right? He throws the ball over the middle.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to alarm anybody, but is Pete Carroll behind this?
Well, I think it's a great question because I think it's one of the more important questions that we're going to have to ask ourselves about this year. You have confidence, whatever happens this year, Brendan, it's an evaluation of what we look at this team going forward if they can't reach contender state, and our confidence there that lies within in their ability to get to a contender state. And I've long been consistent on this, and that Coach Carroll's got to get his hands out of having too many fingers and too many pies. And I've always meant by that is that just be a head coach. Let your coordinators coordinate. Let them call the games. Not that you can't be there to supply some help and stuff, but don't be as hands-on as maybe it feels like you've been in the past. And when I look at the McVay scheme versus the Waldron scheme, like you say, the lack of inside usage of the passing game, but we could go far beyond that, Brendan. The lack of flood zone concept usage, the lack of fly sweeps, the lack of bubble screens, hell, the lack of basic screen usage just about in general. These are all things that I could point to. How about this one? The fact that you're supposed to see similar formations being run out over the course of the game with a McVay-led scheme, but he'll run every kind of iteration and variation off of that same scheme. Instead, with us, it seems like every new play, we get every new scheme brought out. Okay, so we're going to do 2 stacks of these guys over here. Then we'll do trips here and 1 here. Then we'll do 3 tight ends here and 1 tight end here. Then 2 tight ends here and 1 tight end here. And then 3 tight ends in the backfield, 1 tight end over here. It's always different. It's always changing with every single play that we call. That's not what comes from the McVay scheme. So, Brennan, did Waldron wake up when he left the Rams and the next day, right after he had hired Dickerson, his offensive line coach from the Rams, to be the offensive coordinator from Seattle, and he took the playbook McVay and he threw it out the window? Or is something else at play here?
It would be very weird if Waldron had complete control of the offense. And this is what he came up with. fundamentally, because again, I don't think Geno has a problem with throwing it over the middle. He can do it. I understand that, when we had Wilson, okay, he's short, hard for him to see over the line. You're not going to throw the ball over the middle.
Sure.
So it feels like it has to be Pete, because I remember working in an office in 2012, 11 years ago, the Russell Wilson's rookie year. People, Seahawks fans, cubicle to cubicle, talking about the game, talking about the Seahawks. Oh man, Pete doesn't like throwing it over the middle. Pete thinks turnovers happen when you throw it over the middle. He wants to throw it to the sideline because he feels like at least there you're not going to ever turn the ball over when you're throwing it to the boundaries. He feels like you throw it over the middle, you're risking turnovers. So this goes beyond just Russell Wilson being short. This is also Pete Carroll believing that it's winning football to avoid the middle of the field. So I saw that stat and I went, uh-oh. Because unlike Russell, who was kind of not good throwing the ball over the middle, Geno is. The stats back it up.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It doesn't make any sense, Carroll's thought process on that's how he's going to run things, because not only is it, I don't think, really all that true, it just leans you back into more of the place we find ourselves with the Seahawks team time and again that gets completely frustrating. And is everything slides back into the same old state. And what state is that? Simplicity. It's always driving back time and time again to turning this football sport that is so complex on so many different levels and trying to derive it down to the most simplest of levels. Hey, we want to run the football. Oh, does that mean you want to run a wide variant attack where there'll be pitch plays and outside zones and fly sweeps, and you're going to utilize every element in counter runs? Can you remember a counter that we've run recently? Can you ever seeing a counter this season run at all ever?
I mean, I got nothing.
So, but what do we seem to always like? A and B gap, hammer it over the middle, power runs. Everything is GD power, 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 power. Like you say, don't want to run through the middle, throw the middle. So we got to throw to the outside. Okay, so wouldn't you think, Brendan, if you knew this about 10 years ago, you're hearing this, and this has been a common thing that stayed on for 10 years, it's probably a pretty common understanding throughout the league at this point, right? So then when the Hawks have a defensive coordinator that faces the Hawks, they're probably not coming into the game thinking we got to defend the middle of the field and short, right? Especially. They're probably well aware of this by this point. And that's the part that, again, drives me crazy. Just like on the other side of the ball, we talk about that simplicity. What's the simplicity on the defense? Oh, we don't want to run complex fronts. We want to stack fronts. What we're going to do is we're going to show you a 4-man front and then drop everybody back in soft zone coverages and prevent against big plays. And you're going to see that play after play after play after play. And that's just what we're going to run. And that's just what we're going to do. We're going to just trust some point or another the offense is going to make a mistake. It's always going back again and again to this simplistic nature of things. And in my opinion, that's not going to work to get you to go win Super Bowls. The modern era requires more complexity than that. Doesn't mean you have to be the most complex, but it's all back to that thing, Brendan, of being not the 32nd most simplistic team in the NFL, getting yourself into more of the middle road straight so it's not so extreme.
Yeah. Yeah, again, Geno throws it over the middle the least of any quarterback. Him and Kenny Pickett, I think, were tied for last at like 20, 25. And I don't know where else it can come from. Like, I mean, again, because I'll say it again, Geno's EPA is very high on those plays. Like the final offensive play of the game against Washington was a throw over the middle to Metcalf, the play that got us into field goal range. So
I think all the throws in that game on that last drive, almost all of them, I think could be characterized as middle of the field because he ran the slant. Remember on third down, he had the slant that was center of the field too.
Yeah, well, you had the dump offs to Zach. Obviously, those aren't, but those plays didn't really work that well. So
right. But I think you had a Tyler Lockett in cutting on the other side at one point after in that drive too. So, yeah, I mean he can do it, but again, we come back to you and I guessing on why they don't do it. It's like they get stuck in the 3 wide receivers. Why not run that same EPA stat was showing you how good you were in 2 and 3 tight end sets this year, but how little you were sometimes willing to go to that as well. It's like the offense runs itself counterintuitively way too often.
Yeah, but wherever it is, it needs to stop. Whoever's doing it needs to stop because doing stuff over the middle of the field is in many ways kind of a modern NFL thing. I think that the usage of the middle of the field is up compared to the 90s and even the early 2000s.
Well, just take it logically, right, Brendan? You and I have talked about how the big play is basically being snuffed out across the sport on all offenses, how all defenses are playing it, and that they're drifting towards the depth. And so every defense has a weakness. Every defensive call is going to have a weakness. So if in general terms across the board in the NFL defensively speaking, we're seeing teams preventative against the big play, that then means the short play, the easier play, the quick, easy play over the middle type play is going to be more readily available to be had, but you have to be willing to go take advantage of it.
So I just wanted to spend some time on that because I saw that stat on X and I was like, oh no. Oh
Yeah.
no.
It makes sense. It adds up, man. And here's the thing: you've got like with a lot of these solutions, you've got the outside zone run, out pitch plays. You've got a Walker that can run that's got the speed to do it. There've been years before where you say, well, we don't have Chris Carson might not have the speed to run those kind of plays. He's got to be inside. You got the speed to run it now. A fly sweep guy between Jackson Smith and Eskridge, and Derek Young if he's healthy, and even McIntosh once he gets back. You have the guys who can run it now. You can't lean on the old excuse of we don't have the personnel to run it. You do. You absolutely do.
Yeah. What is JSN here to do if not go over the middle of the field?
Right. This is part of the whole plan, theoretically speaking. So bring it into action. Show us it working. Lean into it. But I'm sure they're very aware of these numbers too as they emerge, and that will help to tell us the tale of where the adjustments come from this coaching staff, Brendan. Because the coaching staff, the adjustments are there to be seen pretty easily for the most part. I'm not saying they're easy solutions, but they're at least easy to see where the problem is and where you can kind of lean to finding solutions and answers. Where there's years you don't have the answers, right? If your running back room becomes decimated, if you don't have a slot wide receiver like last year healthy, there may not be an answer to be had there. It's like, well, we're just SOL. There's nobody we can sign. We're just going to have to get by at the position. Not the case with this. There are solutions within this, but teams got to take advantage of them.
Feed me more Seahawks. Thank you for the $2. Do you want Pete to retire? Just a question. All right, you have
just a question. I love how he puts that. So PB lights the dynamite, throws it on our lap, and just a question. My opinion is this: I would like to see Coach Carroll remain the head coach into the future and complete this rebuild and win. Go out there and get a Super Bowl championship. That's what I'd like to see happen. I don't think that happens if he does not modernize some of the concepts on this team that need to be modernized. And he's shown you the signs in the hires of Waldron, in the discussion that he talked about at the combine a couple of years ago about being arrogant in their ways and needing to make some changes. He's telling you that we understand and hear your guys' voice out there that this needs to happen, but he's not quite bringing the ship into the harbor. It's still kind of out there on the open waters a little bit, this concept. And so when we talk about my confidence level in Coach Carroll to take this team to the Super Bowl, it's based on him being willing to evolve and not remain stagnant and stuck in his ways. And unfortunately, there's a lot of this backslide, it feels like, back into the old ways at times. Even when you take the one step forward of seemingly change and updating, there's always this drive that falls you back to the old ways. And I don't think that the old ways can work in a purified fashion like Coach Carroll's kind of still trying to make them do.
Yeah, generally speaking, it's much easier to have the people that you have figure it out than it is to go get new people. It is.
Yeah.
We see these hires go wrong constantly. It would be look at how many coaches the Giants have gone through lately.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the carousel that you risk putting yourself on.
Yeah.
So I would much rather Pete Carroll figure out these things that are currently evading his understanding, and then we go from there and we actually win championships again.
Right.
But I'm aware of the fact that he is very old and it's not overly likely to happen. Sometimes you watch things with his team and you're like, I like where this team is. And then you watch other things and it's like, it's hard to be really optimistic about things really going the way they need to go.
What's make this a tough question, to your point on that, Brendan. There's not an easy answer to be had on this one. And the one thing I do have some optimism for, I look at a Belichick type and I say, well, Belichick is at a spot where if you hire him on to be a coach, he's going to demand to be the general manager as well. And that's sort of like a fatal flaw within who he is right now and what he brings to the table. that you can't get away from, no matter whether or not Belichick's still a very good head coach of a football team. Coach Carroll doesn't have that sort of impediment in front of him that prevents him from reaching back to the promised land. All of these things, and we've mentioned a lot of them in this podcast alone, Brendan, are all right there in front of them, staring him in the face. And so it becomes, will you or won't you, but it's very obvious. And these aren't major things he has to change. They're all really kind of small things in themselves, a little more complexity, a willingness to be a little more varied offensively speaking, lean into the things you do well, despite your old tenets of, I don't like to do this but this is what you do well. These are all little things at the end of the day. The overall big arching things in his player development, where he has this team in year 2 of a rebuild, the environment he creates, the culture that he creates. I don't want to lose that. I don't want Coach Carroll to go, but I do feel like as well, if he doesn't make these evolutions to his game, it will prevent him from getting back to the mountaintop. He might hit a couple of peaks. He might get to peak 2. Whatever we've got Rainier out there, right, Brendan? It's got its different, they're not peaks, but what do they call it? Summits. You got your different summits. He might get to a high summit, but he's not going to get to the peak, because this is the part that you're getting attacked on. This is the part that when we go wrong as a team, it's these factors and things that we can tend to go to. Too much simplistic nature in what you're running out there. Too easy to defend and prepare for. And that's the part to change.
Yeah, and a peak doesn't even have to be winning the Super Bowl. It could be a deep playoff run where you have a really good chance to win a Super Bowl. Maybe it just didn't quite happen. I made a video a couple days ago where I called the Russell Wilson era, which was, in my estimation, 2018 to 2021, that 4-year period where you were trying to build around Russell. I said it was a failure. And a lot of people said, how can you say it's a failure if we were 40-25? And I said, because we didn't have any deep playoff runs before the era blew up.
Yeah, you're right about it. I think a deep playoff run even is an indicator of you changing things. Because I think if I'm to take your point, not to take it a step forward, and that just part of what prevents you from getting to that round 2-3 conference championship, or say nothing of getting back to a Super Bowl, is that simplistic nature and the returns of it ends up sort of pittering off at one point. It can get you past middling teams. It can get you into the back door of the playoffs. It might even find you with one single playoff win, but you can't seem to get any further past that. You've topped out. And if you're making these changes, that would be an indication that they haven't done that. I can't see us staying super simplified and getting to a conference championship, I guess, if that's a quicker way to say that.
All right. Let's see here. Adis the Gamer, thank you for the $1.99. Kenny McIntosh playing his first game on Sunday. I don't know why he would.
Yeah, it's been a little bit like the Lucas one on this one, Addis, where what we get from Carroll and what we're getting as far as the indicators on this seem to be kind of vague with this a little bit. So I'm not sure. They seem to have their own kind of weird timetable. He didn't suffer some crazy injury. This happened back in August. So he's had over 3 months now, depending on what.
They've said he's 100% healthy. They just don't have room for him on the roster because they like what they have at running back. And say whatever you want, DJ Dallas produces results on his returns. It's not always fun to watch the way Dante Hall was, but he's producing. So they don't want to go away from that. And I don't blame him.
This year though? I mean, he's had a couple of returns.
I did a video. He is, I think, 3rd in the league in punt return yards per return, and he's like 6th in kick return yards.
All right.
He is, objectively speaking, the best return man in the league in terms of consistency.
That's fair. I'm not I'd like to just see what McIntosh do and get him some touches, but it's not a dire thing. It's not the thing that's like sitting at our offensive forefront that we need to jump on.
Yeah, I get so many comments saying that DJ Dallas sucks at returning. I'm like, no, he definitely doesn't. He's not fun to watch the way Dante Hall was, or the way, what was his name, Cordarrelle Patterson was. But he's getting it done. He just does it very differently. Most return men will play the whole season and just kind of be whatever, and then they'll return like 2 kicks for touchdowns and it boosts their average. DJ just kind of grinds out an extra 5 yards every single return. So it's different. It's different, but
yeah, I'm fine. I mean, he's done a fine enough job back there. Yeah, there's I guess a dynamic element you're thinking maybe McIntosh give you that you just like. Dallas is never housing anything, like to your point on that. You might get that 5, 6, 7 consistently every time, but he's never kind of breaking one for you. But it's not something it's not a dire change that's sitting there that just we've got to get figured out.
And by the way, Kenny McIntosh isn't breaking anything either. He runs like that 4.7 240 or whatever it is. I think it would be the same as Dallas. He would be a consistent but rarely explosive kick returner. He doesn't have the speed.
It'd be more punt return for McIntosh. Like I'd leave if I could Dallas to the kick and McIntosh to the punt. You probably don't have the roster spots to pull it off, but that'd be what my main issue with Dallas is more the punt returns. Just his feel for it gets me nervous back there.
I understand that part of it. Okay, so back to the Rams defense real quick. They have not been very strong in terms of run defense so far this year. They've been a little below average. Should be able to run on them here. I mean, if we're going to have Peters out there, which it looks like we will, one thing that we can do to kind of take advantage is run behind him. And there was a lot written this week about how most of our good run plays against Washington were behind the right side of the line. So maybe we can attack some over there.
Well, you got in the first matchup in this game, obviously the offense didn't provide you very much into that second half once your tackles went down. But to your point on this, you ran for 5.3 yards per carry with Walker on 12 carries in that game. I think running the ball has got to be something that's at the forefront of what you do in this game. And much like with last week, even when it's not going good, you got to stick with it and not fall back into we got to start passing again thing, because there seems to be a pull by Waldron at times to just start getting super pass happy. I think you've got to find a way to run the ball, if just but to keep the time of possession close here and to keep Washington from tiring that defense out if they're dinking and dunking you up the field a bit, and really moving chains and converting third downs like they did in that first matchup. I'm trying to see, what did they do in the first matchup we had? So they were 11 of 17 on third downs in that first matchup. So you got to be aware of the fact that there's going to, especially with these 2 third down slot receivers they have, they're going to be moving chains at times. You've got to find a way to move chains. You've got to find a way to keep your defense fresh through this game. Running the ball is, to me, that's the first place I start with this game, Brendan. Behind passing here, running flies or running bubbles, running the ball and finding consistency with it, especially with not just running A and B gap runs, but like you did last week. I got to give Waldron credit. Part of why I loved his game last week, and part of why, Brendan, you had the most yards last week than you had all throughout the year, was not just you played Washington, they're such a bad defense. That contributed. Part of it too was that you utilized those outside runs. You worked them in a little bit, even when they weren't necessarily going for a lot of yards, that you're just making the defense have to play it honestly a little bit and not just laser focus in on those inside runs as the things that they have to pay attention to.
Yeah. We ran the ball fairly well against the Rams the first time. It's just in that second half, the tackles got hurt and we fell behind and we had to abandon it. But we proved we could run the ball on them fairly well, I think. So I'm definitely thinking that's something to attack here. Honestly, most elements of this Rams defense are fairly attackable, I think. Anything else on your mind when it comes to this Rams defense and how we can go after it this week?
Just got to have Gino on his P's and Q's with the blitz. The blitz stuff is, and how he deals with these stack fronts and blitzes, I think is going to be a big determiner. I think we'll run the ball, but where we come to success in converting those third downs, which for us in games this year have been at times really miss when, it's hits fine, but we miss, we can't get a third down for our life. It's going to come on the back of him recognizing the blitzes, finding the hot route. There's a couple of throws in this last week's game, where he would go to, for instance, the throw he makes to DK Metcalf in the Commanders game up the seam, where DK's got to try to one-hand it on a throw that's behind him. There's no separation. On that very play, they're bringing a blitz. Gino doesn't see the blitz. You've got Bobo breaking in on an in-cutting drag route. And the easiest route in the book for Gino to then go and hit on that. He's wide open on the play. Couple of plays in this last game were like that. There was 2 that stood out to me from it. In those moments, Gino's got to have that dialed into where's my hot route? Where's my plan prior to the snap to go to if this blitz comes that I can go and lean into and hit that throw. That's an easy throw. Just get the ball out of my hands. How he deals with that, I think even more than the consistency in the ground game than this game, Brendan, will determine whether or not we find success.
Mm-hmm. And I want the running back. This might be another game where Charbonnet outsnaps Walker because I want his pass protection out there. I think that's going to be key here. I think he is already, and this is actually very impressive for a rookie, better at pass protecting than Walker. So he's been as advertised in that front.
Absolutely. He's sliding right into the role that I think we ideally saw it this last week. The balance of thunder and lightning that you got is what we have in our mind of the hopefulness, I think, of what we come to game, where you can really lean on this as a 2-headed rushing attack. And I think you saw last week the difficulty that can be for a defense in dealing with that, because there's this thinking maybe that like Walker's in the game and then he goes out and you see Charbonnet and the whole defense is like, oh, Charbonnet's in. Everybody put their hard hat on. We got to tackle on this one now. But there is a little bit of that. You have a Walker type who's in there dancing. And did he break it out? Did he break it out? You got the defense kind of, sort of, where's he going? Where's he going on this play? And then you have a guy like Charbonnet coming in and he's just coming downhill and he's looking to bury his helmet in your chest. I think there's a little bit of it starts to make both backs a little more effective when you can do that. I know it's the fun thunder and lightning thing, but I think there's also something to it in how it does sort of throw defenses off when they start to get used to a certain rhythm in the game of the running back and how they're running. And both of them have such two different styles and what they bring to play.
Yeah. And another thing on my mind, kind of, if the Seahawks use screens in this game and it works, it might be time to declare that the Seahawks screen game is finally back, because that would be several games this year where the screen has been effective. Obviously, some games more than others, like the Washington game. I doubt we'll have another game like that for the next 10 years in terms of success on screens and yak. But if we can do it again, I'm going to start believing this is just going to be a thing we can lean on rather than just a thing that happened in one game.
I mean, you might be right on something, though, that we can go lean into again, because one thing begats the other. Why did the screen game work so well last week? Why was it utilized so often? Because, Gino, and some of this is how he deals with the blitz and he handles it. Some of it is also, how does Waldron handle the blitz? And one of the first things that an offensive coordinator is going to go to in their book when it comes to countering a blitz will be to go to the screen game. And what did they do last week? Commanders saw the Ravens and what they did to us in Baltimore and said, we're going to duplicate that. They duplicate it. They bring the stack fronts, they bring the blitzes, and you hit them with the screenplay to counter it. So that's a place where, as an offensive coordinator, you can make the job so much easier for your quarterback at that point by dialing those up, especially when you're able to anticipate it so much, Brendan. And aren't you able to anticipate it when you see so much of a proliferation of it being run like these past 2 weeks? It's been run by these two teams where they don't always bring them all. But the thing with it is you bring those 6 guys down in the box, right? And you layer them down that line, and then you're running a screen to the other side. It's hard for those guys over here on the back side of the formation to get back over to those screen, even if they're looking to drop back into coverage post snap, right? Fake the blitz and then drop off. It's hard for them to still go over there and then get that impact to that side of the field if you're running it there versus, vice versa. So it's a way to attack, even if they aren't coming with the blitz, but to go after them with the stack front part of it. And especially cause this defense to just maybe dial it back, not let them pin their ears back. That first matchup, man, by that second half, the ears were pinned to the back of their head. They were going, so fast and furious off the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. Everything, it moves a little slower than we would like, but some of these things do move, right? We're good at screens. Year 3 of Shane Waldron, we might finally have something with screen. We might finally have something with yak. Apparently the throws after the middle are going to take another 8 seasons. I don't know.
It's a better late than never, I guess.
Okay, so special teams. The Rams have used 2 different kickers this year. I think they gave up on barely Brett, maybe Maher, and moved on to somebody else a few weeks ago, which makes sense. And they actually have a rookie punter, Ethan Evans, who's been okay, but should not be as good as our special teams unit.
I'll tell you what, man, we've had some punters that have just been knocking moonshots on us the past couple of weeks. I mean, we can't get a punter that short legs anything this year, Brendan. It's like all the kickers make their kicks and the punters boot it 55 yards every punt, it feels like.
Yeah. So I think that says all that there is to say about this one. I mean, we shouldn't be sleeping on them because what happened in week 1, we know we really need this win because the team will say what they need to say, what they want to say. They must know that it could be a rough go of it over the rest of over the next month after this one. So I think everything's pretty well locked in. All we need to do now is what's the score prediction? How do you think it goes?
I do think we're going to get the win. I think you put this together really well about where this game sets up for you to take this ultimately maximally seriously, Brendan, right? Because there does feel like, if we read into a little bit of the comments from Carroll and company in that first game, that, he put a lot of it on himself, like not having the team quite as ready to go. And so you go into this game going, okay, you've got that stack of 4 teams on deck, Niners twice in a couple of weeks. does the team start to look a little bit too far ahead on this one and not concentrate on the here and now? But I think that embarrassing first loss, that understanding that you get this one done and you build in that room for error, you build in that ability to not have to slaughter this 4-game section coming up, but to just kind of weather its storm. And that puts their focus really squarely on this game in a way where it is truly treated like what they talk about, Brendan, which is as a championship opportunity. And so I think that they are absolutely going to take into this one with ultimate serious tone. You're going to get the best effort from this Hawks crew this week. And I think in that effort that they're going to provide, they're going to come out with a win. I think it will be a close game because that's just the way that these play out. I'll go with 27-24. Seahawks are able to get a final field goal from Myers, who continues a strong season at the end on a last minute. Gino comes back on the fourth quarter drive once again, and they pull it out the day. But Rams are able to make some hay. Our offense able to find some more consistency than they could in that first matchup, and we just get enough.
Yeah, I'll go with, I like 27. I think 27 makes sense. I'm going to say 27-20, though. I feel a little bit better, but same basic idea. I'm going to have to go with 27-20. So I feel all right about it, maybe a little bit better than I should. But, you go down the list. If you compare the rosters, like, I'm sorry, but we have to come back to this. Seahawks are better at like almost every position. If they win this game, that is a pretty bad indictment on the way the coach is prepped for this game, I think, because we clearly do have better players at every level.
It's a 100% valid point, and it's part of what, when I look at this year and the worst loss this year, to me, it's not the Ravens game. The worst loss this year is the opening week against the Rams for the reasons that you just gave. You are better than this team. You are more talented than this team. This team has leaned into the rebuild. And while they haven't given up necessarily their greatest of assets, they've given up some prime assets over this past year, from Ramsey to Jefferson to Akers and everything in between, as they've kind of offloaded to kind of lean into this year a little bit in what they're doing. And you got to take advantage of that. You've got tough enough matchups coming on deck. You don't get to set up the stage like this where you are just much better on paper all the way across the board. And you got no business losing to this team with where they're at right now and where you're at in this season and what you have in front of you to go and accomplish on the back of getting this win and what sets the stage for the rest of this year. So we're going to learn, as we learn through that 4-game stretch, Brendan, about this team and who they are. That's the next kind of yard post sign of where you are and what you are. We're going to learn about this week, though, too. If you found some answers here with McVey-Carroll? Have you maybe not ultimately gotten to a point where you're going to win every match or whatever, but at least even this up a little bit, find some other extra answers here. It'll be interesting to see.
Castro Solari, thank you for the $1.99. Hey, Brendan, has your opinion on Myers changed? No, not really. We're trending in the right direction. But as of right now, Jason Myers is still like 24th in the league in field goal percentage. He is still one of the lesser kickers in the league as a collective. It's been great lately. He hasn't missed a kick in a while. And he's had a couple games here where he's had to do a lot because the offense hasn't been able to finish drives. But there is more work to be done, for sure.
Yeah, he had such a tough start to this cause where it's taking some time to just get yourself to the place where you're to Brendan's point, and that you're on the right side of things from a kicking standpoint, and it's not kind of is off. He is raising the percentage point up, and if he can continue to kind of do what he's doing, like if he ends up the season at 31 of 35 or something like that, where he has one more miss going through the rest of the year, maybe two more misses, but he's still doing what he's doing, then certainly my place on it will be that it's money well spent at that point. Our only worry with the deal was that you were paying him $5 million a year. And this is in Brendan, in my case, both when we had this contract signed and we remain in this place, is that when you signed him, you were getting an inconsistent guy who was inconsistent for 8 years of his career. And to the point that you could time him on a stopwatch, this consistency. And so, last year, you just go from 2020, hits 100% of his kicks in 2020, 21, 73%. Then last year, 91%. Now back down to 83%. And that's even with the current run at the end of things is where he's been. So you just get this fluctuation with him that's just kind of hardlined in, it feels like, yet you're paying him at $5 million a year, which is like top of the market kind of kicking salary you're paying. You're paying him like he's Justin Tucker. And that's not quite the performance you're getting. But if he can keep it up and hold strong and find a little bit like what he did last year, 34, 37, then, maybe even a little bit worse, I'll still be like, okay, I get it. Because Brendan, we got to acknowledge that this team doesn't, with the Geno-led crew, this offense with Waldron led, that isn't the best in red zone, and you need a kicker that hits his kicks, when you get down there. But
yeah, we have not tested him from long range yet, have we? This year, he hasn't had to kick like some 59-yarder yet, because that's kind of his strength as a kicker. He's got that big leg; he can make the 60-yarders.
1 of 3, 55 is his long this year.
Oh,
but
okay. Which one was that?
1 of 3 on 1 of 3 on 50-yard attempts is what I was trying to say.
I know he missed a long one against the Giants. I remember that, but it wasn't super long. It wasn't like some 58, 59-yarder. It wasn't like the one he made in LA a few years ago, the 61-yarder. Even last year in the playoffs, he nailed the 59-yarder against San Fran. That was an incredible kick.
That's right. No, he had one in one of the games where we needed him to hit the kick. I can't remember which one it was. I want to say it might have been the Ravens game, actually. That was the one he kicked it in.
Yeah, there was the Cardinals game. He had the 47-yarder when we needed to go up 2 scores with a few minutes left, and he made it. That kind of iced that game. So, yeah, there's some positive stuff here. But, I mean, if you're going to pay that kind of money for a kicker, he should be one of the best kickers in the league. And right now, he's nowhere near close to that.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. We'll see where he stands at the end of the year, but that's definitely the important part because it's significant what you're giving him.
All right. So I think that's it for the show tonight. Thank you, Brandon, for coming out and doing this with me again. Thank you to everybody who showed up in the chat this week and participated. Thank you to everybody who watched. We have an important game this weekend, and we will reconvene on Tuesday, 2 days after the game is played, and talk about whatever happened out there, good or bad, or just kind of neutral. We'll dissect it, and then we move into the part of the schedule where we find out how good we really are. Real quick here, Radu Turkan, thank you for the $1.99. McIntosh will take Dallas's spot next year. Yeah, I think that's probably the outcome here. Dallas, I know he's a locker room guy and people like him. I don't think we're going to be able to bring him back.
No, he'll probably get a Travis Homer like small low end contract that we want to do that, or you can get McIntosh at the cheapest of cheap 7th round contract.
Right.
That'll be a part that probably ends up being the end up determiner on that one.
Yeah, his time will come. His time will come.
That's for sure. I'm excited to see what he can bring too, because he's such a unique player.
All right, so thank you everybody for coming out. I may stream some more Spider-Man 2 over on Twitch later tonight. We will see. Brandon, again, thank you. Can't wait to do this again next week. My
pleasure, man. I love doing this with you every week, man. So looking next. Hopefully we got to win, and we can really be looking to that Niner matchup. Really like, all right, here we go. First there's the loss.
Cable Thanos said that he would do a new Seahawks hype video if we beat the Rams and Niners these next 2 weeks.
Oh, that in itself makes it worthwhile, does it not?
Yeah, because he has not done one for years.
I know. The man's been quiet. We need him back in force here.
All right, so there's one thing left we got to resolve here. One way to wrap it up. The only way to wrap it up. Maybe the most important part of the show. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, whatever happens, we're all going to be here. Whatever happens, we are stuck here. Can't walk away from it now. It's not always going to be, the results are what they are. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes they're not. But it never stops. You never stop being a fan. You can't stop being a fan because you are a fan.
That's right.
So we're going to say it, and then we're going to sign off, and then we're going to do this again next week. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.